How's it going, class? This is Mr. Miles coming to the podcast, and today what we're going to be talking about changes in allele frequencies. So recently the big topic we've been talking about is evolution. Okay, if you feel like you don't know too much about it, make sure you watch the podcast previous to this one to make sure you understand the definition of evolution, natural selection, variation, the importance of sexual reproduction in evolution, artificial versus natural selection, and I feel like I'm forgetting one. Oh, and adaptations. So make sure you understand what all those definitions mean. Otherwise, you might get thrown for a loop on this video. This one's going to move kind of fast, but you guys will be fine. I'd recommend maybe watching it 2 or 3 times if you're having a hard time with it. So what we're talking about evolution. Now, the big thing that we're going to be paying attention to is we're paying attention to the gene pool. So the gene pool is all of the alleles that you can pull from. So you remember that a gene is any piece of, so here's our double helix DNA. So any piece of our DNA that codes for a very specific protein. And so that specific coding for that protein, so let's say we take this one out and this makes a specific protein, we're going to call this an allele. So an allele is a type of trait. Sometimes it appears itself as a physical trait, sometimes maybe it causes a mental trait. It's any special type of protein that is a little bit different than maybe another allele. So maybe an allele for eye color, maybe an allele for a special type of protein that induces growth, so you grow a little bit taller. And so we're focusing about that, so it's alleles. So in the gene pool, you have a bunch of different types of alleles. Let's say we take a rat. So let's say we have a whole bunch of rats, and let's say we have 2 different alleles. You can either have a big B for black, or you can have a little b for white. So you guys remember we were talking about like dominant versus recessive. Let's say what you're going to do is you're going to add up all of the black alleles that are in. So let's say you have maybe 2 rats that are heterozygous. Let's say you have 2 rats that are homozygous dominant. Let's say you have 2 rats that are homozygous recessive. Actually, no, let's go 3 rats that are homozygous recessive. Let's say we have 1 more heterozygous. So what you're going to do is to look at the gene pool, you'd have to count up how many different types of alleles there are. So we're going to have 2 alleles, so you can either be a black allele or you can be a white allele. And we're going to count up the total. So black, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we have 7 black alleles. And with this we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we have 9 white alleles. Now if you looked at our rat population, how many black rats do we have? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, we have 5. We have 5 black rats compared to 3 white rats. But we don't really want to pay attention to that as much, because that's the phenotype, that's what color they actually are. But what we're going to really be paying attention to is the alleles in the gene pool, because what we're looking at is we're trying to look at the allele frequency. Now, the general rule of thumb is if you have an environment that's nice and stable, there's no weird changes that are happening, the allele frequency should stay the same. It'll be like a percentage. So if I pull up my calculator here, I can look at, well, how many rats do I have? I have 16 rats. So I'd want to know, okay, what's the allele frequency of black alleles? So you just do 7 divided by 16 so I can get a percentage. And my frequency would be 0.43. So, from knowing that percentage, I can know exactly what my allele frequency is for white. It'd be 0.56 because it's also total 100%. So my black allele frequency is 43%. My white allele frequency is, what did I say, 57%. So those are my frequencies. Now, if everything were to stay the same and my population were to simply increase in numbers, so instead of having 16 rats, maybe I go up to 100 rats, what should traditionally happen is my allele frequency should stay the same, even though I'll have more overall black alleles, more overall white alleles, but the percentages of those alleles should stay exactly the same. Okay, so that's my allele frequency. However, every once in a while, this can change. There's a few different events that can cause a change in allele frequency. And this change in allele frequency is what can lead to evolution. Okay, so what we're looking at is something called genetic drift. So genetic drift is the idea that the allele frequencies can change. There's a few events that can cause that. There's the bottleneck effect. And we're going to start off with these 2. And there's the founder effect. So the bottleneck effect is random. This is the type of natural selection where a random catastrophic event happens. Maybe a volcano erupts. Maybe a flood comes into the area. Maybe an asteroid hits. Maybe there's a really bad drought, and it's like a really bad one. This is going to change the allele frequency because this will kill off rats at random. So maybe 43% of the black rats, maybe just a bunch of black rats happen to be in the area that this volcano went off at, and so you watch that percentage plummet. Now, of course, you didn't increase rat numbers, but instead, because a lot of black rats died that have those black alleles, the white allele percentage is going to go up. Okay, so that's the bottleneck. So it's random disasters that causes a change. So usually this happens when you have a sharp decrease in species number. The next one is the founder effect. So the founder effect simply states this, is that you might have a total population. So let's say here's an area that our rats live in. So we have our black rats and our brown rats all mixed into here. And let's say that these rats one day start kind of wandering out of the territory a little bit, because let's say they like to eat berries that grow on trees, and for some reason that a couple little group of, maybe like we have like 12 of these rats out of 100, and they slowly start wandering off this way, and nightfall comes and they get lost and they just keep wandering further and further and further away, and now they're much farther away. Well, now that they're divided from these rats, so we have our 12 rats over here, and we have, no, don't yell at me, I don't know math, we have our 88 rats left over here. Well, this distance, and if they never find their way back and they never find these guys, there's no way that they can sexually reproduce. So these 12 rats, and really it's random. Maybe all the brown rats are hanging out with each other, maybe all the black rats are hanging out with each other, or the white rats, sorry, and they just kind of got divided there. What you notice is losing that 12 rats is going to change the percentage either up or down for like black alleles or white alleles, and the same thing's going to be happening over here, depending on which 12 rats left. And so your allele frequencies are going to change. So you're going to see a difference in the actual percentages. Now, the other ideas that can happen is, let's say we have non-random mating. So that's the next one. So in the case of non-random mating, let's say that females, which can either be black or white, tend to prefer males that are black. Maybe they prefer them because, I don't know, they just, well, a lot of times what you'll see is in the animal kingdom, so I'm just trying to think of, I don't know, I guess in this case you'd want to think of different colors, is you'll see that the male will usually be very brightly colored, and this is a very good thing for the female, because if the male is brightly colored, it indicates the one thing, that that male is very healthy. It's healthy enough that it can be very brightly colored, that it can stand out and it can still run away from predators. Also, the good thing about being brightly colored, the male and the female not being brightly colored, is that if a predator does come, it's going to go after the male, not the female. That's why when you see ducks, the male is going to be brightly colored, but the female is going to be a very dull, boring brown. It's because the male's meant to stick out, so the female would be able to get away without being chased by the predator. So let's say they live in an environment where it's very light in color, so if you are a large black rat, you're showing that you're healthy, because whenever something tries to eat you, you can distract the attention, the animal will chase after that, and you can get away, the female likes it. So non-random mating, is there some sort of trait in there that the female is looking for? Maybe it's brightly colored, maybe it's if you're a bird, you have really big feathers. It just shows that you're healthy, that you're a good specimen, or there's an advantage to mating with you versus somebody else. Okay, because originally our black and white rats, it was just random, like who cares? It was a very non-racist rat society. But then all of a sudden they become very racist. No. They're just looking for, there's some sort of distinction between the two rats, one that's making it better. And so non-random mating can occur. And of course, if females are always picking to reproduce the black rats, their alleles are going to become, because they have the black alleles, they're going to become more dominant in the population. Another thing that can happen is if you have a small population size. So small population size. Now, in a small population size, again, let's say instead of having just these couple of rats, let's say that we only have like maybe 4, and we have all 4 of them, or let's say 1, 2, 3. Let's say it's just these guys right here. Well, see, you have 2 white alleles, but let's say, well, maybe this guy just doesn't get to mate a whole lot, and just these guys do. You see the percentages sway a lot more when you have a small percentage size. Just because of the fact that there's not enough room for like averaging out. It's like if you flip a coin 5 times. So you flip a coin 5 times. You actually have a pretty good, you should have a 50-50 chance of getting either heads or tails. But some people, we flipped a coin 5 times and you've landed heads every single time. However, if you were to flip that 50 times, or 500 times, or 5,000 times, eventually that should come to around a 50-50 percentage. Okay, but maybe if you flip a coin just 3 times, you can get tails, tails, tails in a row. Now, eventually, it should correct it. Law of averages should, but if you have a small population size, you can really mess with those numbers every once in a while. Now, the next thing that can happen is you can have immigration or emigration. So, immigration. Immigration means you have new species coming in, and emigration, you have species leaving. They're going out. So that's why when we call America, when we refer to immigrants, it's people who come to America. It's coming in, so just think of it like in immigration. So you have new species coming into a population. Emigration, you have them exiting. Okay, so it's emigration, exiting. So let's say we have our rats. Let's say a new, let's say like 10 new brown rats come in from a population nearby. When they come in, they're automatically going to change that. They're going to change that allele frequency. They're going to change the percentage. If you have a whole bunch of them, like these 12 that left, and it's very closely related to the founder effect. If you have those 12 that left, again, you're going to change populations for both the founders and the guys that were already originally there. Now, the next one you can have is mutations. And again, this happens all the time. Let's say all of a sudden, instead of black, now we're starting to get blue rats, or some weird mutation that happens, and females tend to like that. Or maybe it's just random. All of a sudden this blue percentage comes up, and now instead of dealing with just 2 percentages, we're now dealing with 3. And maybe if this continues to, randomly mate, it's going to continue passing that weird third allele on, or maybe there's an advantage to having it. I don't know. And of course, the last one is our ever so happy natural selection. So in natural selection, this is just the whole idea. Let's say that all of a sudden, this place where they live, it actually gets very snowy. And now that it's very snowy, we also know that it's very white, so those black rats are kind of screwed because they stick out like sore thumbs. And now they're going to be naturally selected against the black rats will be. And so they're all going to start getting eaten. And now you're going to see the percentage of white rats. Their allele frequency is going to go up while the black allele frequency is going to go down. So again, all this deals with allele frequency. So to recap what we just talked about. Starting from here, we're talking about evolution. We care about the gene pool. The gene pool is simply what alleles are found in a population. And when you look at the allele frequency, that's the percentages that the alleles show up. So in our case, when we counted up all the alleles, we had 43% black, 57% white. Now that can change. There's a few things that can do it. And we call this genetic drift whenever you have that change in allele frequency. You have the bottleneck effect, which is just random, disastrous, catastrophe, large changes to the environment. You have the founders effect, so part of the population splits off, and now if you're monitoring both species populations, you will have a different change, unless, there is a random chance that could be perfect. The allele frequencies can both stay the same. That does sometimes happen, but it's very rare when you have a founders effect, and that's just where a group leaves, and now you're studying both of them independent of one another because they can't mate anymore. You have non-random mating, so maybe one of the alleles is now in the environment being selected for, or the females. Well, it's the females who really care about, oh, hey, I want to mate with this organism because it's got a trait, an allele that I like. If you're dealing with a small population size, obviously it's going to take a little bit for the allele frequency to stabilize, for the law of averages to come into play. So you will see changes in the allele frequency. In immigration versus emigration, if you have guys leaving, depending on who it is, they're going to take those alleles with them. They'll change the percentage, or sorry, this is new guys. Immigration, it's them coming in, whereas in emigration, them leaving. Either way, it's going to change the allele frequencies in there. You get a mutation, so this black can all of a sudden start becoming blue rats. Maybe they start getting selected for. Maybe the females like that because they can distract predators from. I don't know. But either way, you have this new percentage right here, or this new percentage that we have to start accounting for. So it's going to change obviously the percentage that here because it can only equal 100. And then of course you have natural selection, which we're very familiar with. Is that all of a sudden if it becomes very snowy, you're going to be naturally selected against. Okay, so just a few new ideas, but it's not too hard. Again, if you're confused, watch the podcast again just to deal with it. Until next time, I'll talk to you later. Bye.